Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with our theme that we started last week, continuing on into this week, then versus now, exploring two tracks from a band, one of an older song and one of a newer song, and seeing how the band has evolved or changed or just refined and honed their skills. Today we're going to be looking at some Oranssi Pazuzu. The track is Komeetta off of the Cause Monument album. Let's dive into this and see what Oranssi Pazuzu is bringing to the table today. Bass is very prominent. Very dissonant treble stuff going on over here. Okay. I have no words for that section. This symbol over here, I was fine until I noticed it, and now I can't ignore it. It's so far forward. It's so wild. It's like almost a spacey take inside of a black metal track, but focusing on a ton of dissonance, unstable harmony. Okay, just toss in some glitch, why don't we? It moves. It's like this UFO sound, like a classic 60s UFO sound effect. this is just the end of the track. Come on. Alright, a little bit of a riff change here to take us out of the track proper. Yeah, I'm not gonna drill this home like I sometimes would. That ending's too long. That's all I'm gonna say on it. Maybe if you really enjoy that atmosphere, it's fine, but yeah, that was very indulgent. The rest of the track, though, I always forget that this group is black metal. For some reason, I have them in generic avant-garde metal rather than experimental blackened stuff. And this is very interesting black metal, not to dismiss that. But for some reason, I kind of have them in my mind in the same place as Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum and what is that other group? I can't remember what they are, what their name is, but another more experimental generic metal sound. And I think I say this every time we check this band out. I'm like, oh wow, dude, this is black metal. I don't know why I don't have them filed away like that. So the beginning of this track was interesting. We start off with a bit of dissonance, introducing the harmonic ideas, but it doesn't take long for the vocals to come in and the 16th note picking on multiple guitars, really focusing on the atmosphere through the chords of the multiple instruments more so than riff alterations or anything like that. The guitars are pretty steadfast in their 16th note picking. That's not to say that there isn't diversity of rhythm on this track. The drums and the bass do some really interesting things rhythmically. But when you listen to the guitars and the vocals, it's very clearly built from the foundations of black metal. But this song goes for that experimental side of black metal. Is this fuzzy and distorted, kind of compressed, like a mid-fi thing? Are there harsh vocals in here that are rather steady? I say there's a little bit of variety to them, but it's still, this is the vocal tone. This is what we're going to sit at. Yeah, a lot of black metal elements in here, but there's also harmonically a push towards the more avant-garde, the more experimental. There's a lot of dissonance in this track, a lot of harmonic instability, but that's not consistent either. And I think that's what's really interesting about this, is that there is some sort of balance to the instability. And I find that to be really interesting. It almost sounds, maybe I don't have a word for what it sounds like. Maybe also I'm a little bit adapting to dissonance because honestly, this is a very dissonant piece, but it makes sense to me for some reason. And while, yeah, dude, it took a second to get adjusted to, I kind of came around to it by the end. It wasn't as uncomfortable as dissonant harmonic elements have been in the past for me. It's not to say that I'm going to go out of my way and jump into this album as soon as I'm done recording this. I don't know that I'm ready for that, but there was some sort of balance in store. And I don't know if that's me or them, but I found it to be quite interesting because it paints a very specific picture. We have multiple guitars and the bass all presenting the harmonic information, all of them playing one note each as far as I could hear, but when they come together, you have 4 notes from these instruments combined. You got a straight up chord there. They might not be changing their notes all at the same time to have this chordal stack movement, but at any time you have 4 notes playing simultaneously, you're getting very distinct chords from here. And I think distinct is the right word for it because it does follow patterns. I don't know if I would necessarily call it functional harmony, particularly because I have a tough time understanding what they're trying to say with their dissonance. From that perspective, it isn't functional harmony, which is the musical theory term for using chords in specific orders to tell, well, I mean, I guess technically to tell a phrase, to create rising and falling action. Whenever you're listening to music and you get to that final chord and it just feels right, that's functional harmony at play. This might be functional, just not in the traditional view of that, which tends to have rest, tension, and directionality. Those are the 3 types of chords you can have in layman's terms. Very, like, not even Music 101 terminology here. This is pretty much tension all the time, but there is variance to the dissonance. Some of the chords actually feel okay, spicy for sure, but not total dissonance. And I find that it does create a gut feeling. Like I can't put words to this. I can't intellectually come at this because still a lot of it just sounds like noise to me. But in my gut, I hear or I feel movement. It isn't just a series of noisy ideas. There is a pattern to it, a flow. I don't have the experience with it to be able to interpret it properly. I need more time with this language, this noise, to better understand it. But in my gut, I hear something here that I don't always with more experimental or noisy outfits. And I have a bit of appreciation for that. And again, I don't know if it's them doing really neat stuff here or if it's me just acclimating to more noisy things as y'all refuse to let me just live my life without noise in it. But I am getting something, even if it's only like 5% of what they're trying to say, I'm getting something out of it, which I find interesting. Now I mentioned, that's the harmonic side of things. This track is pretty much from start to finish working with dissonance. There's not a lot to dive into there. But I mentioned that there's rhythmic elements in here too, and the guitars, sure, 16th notes all the way through. But the bass, kind of funky. I was not expecting the bass to have that kind of syncopation to it, nor just the general cadence. It doesn't play around with 16th notes, or more frequently for bass notes, 8th notes, which are twice as long as a 16th note. There's less attacks to it, less element for it to be muddy. Whenever you have a really big bass tone, usually playing at half the speed of your guitars is the right way to go, since bass tones are bigger. I'm sure there's some physics and science thing to do with sound waves there, but it usually sounds cleaner for your bass to be a little slower, usually half speed of what your guitars are doing. But they don't even do that. They stick to quarter notes and half notes. I think there is a couple of 8th notes just to create some speed or movement at places, but it's kind of focused on these really tight riffs, not constant sounds. Syncopated, tight riffs though. They're memorable in a way that, I mean, the guitars are memorable too. They're all 16th notes. You can't forget that. It's like a simple sentence to remember what the guitars are doing. But I wouldn't say that they're memorable. When I leave this song, I mean, okay, the guitars are like most black metal guitars, but the bass, it has something unique to it, something that stands out. I really like that. And the drums are in the same way. Despite being a black metal blueprint here, we don't have alternating snare and bass. We don't have 16th note bass kicks. We don't have the staples of aggressive black metal. It's kind of rockier. And, from that perspective, I think the bass line is kind of taken more inspiration from rock, maybe even a little bit of funk too. Not a lot, but I remember thinking the first time I heard the bass, I was like, dude, that's kind of funky. Not necessarily a funky bass line, something you would find in funk music, but definitely more interesting and spicy than I would expect for the blackened sound that they were laying down everywhere else in this song. And between those two instruments, they create a very interesting counter to the constant dissonant sound coming from the guitars. It's almost like in a comedy, right? You have your funny guy and then your straight man, and they play off of each other because one is completely, strict and serious, and the other one doesn't stop making jokes. And the comedy is that they're just not on the same level there. That's kind of what's going on here, not for a comedic purpose, but I think just allowing each side to elevate the other, which is what happens in these buddy comedies. The funny guy is funnier because the other guy doesn't get it because everything's serious to them, right? And so it's about contrasts elevating each other, and I think that's what's happening here. The rock side has some neat rhythm to it, creates good flow, solid ideas, and they elevate the oppressive tension in the constant attacks on the guitars, in the tense harmonies of the guitars. The very interesting combination that ends up kind of working. It gives me something to fall back on when the noise of the guitars and the vocals start to get a bit much for me. There is one point of deviation here, though. What was the first chorus? I assume it was a chorus anyways. I didn't know what it was at the time. And when we came back to the lyrics, which, if I heard right, it's just repeating the title over and over again, Komeetta. We didn't have that same section, I don't think, when we came back to this lyrical idea. We had a couple of concepts on the bottom that were reminiscent of it, but the guitars were playing a very different thing. The first chorus stands out. I had no words for it. I still don't have words for it. I don't know what I heard. It was like a hard rock idea. We had snare on 2 and 4. We had a funky bass line, almost some space rock ideas coming from one of the guitars at least. And then mixing that with the noise and dissonance in the other guitars and someone screaming Komeetta. And this kind of got extrapolated in the bridge, which focused on this massive amount of echo and delay. And this certainly felt space rocky. I don't think I've ever heard space rock and black metal thrown together. I'm not sure I enjoy it, but I do think that it works really well in this context, because when you have this note continuing to echo throughout the song and you get to hear it 8 times, 9 times after it's played, something like that, you get to harmonize off of it. So you play a note, it echoes. When it echoes again, you play another note. Now you have a dyad. They're going to echo and bounce around. And then you can play a third note. You're going to have a triad here. You don't have any other instruments, but you can build harmony off of this. And they use it, not for positive harmony, not for consonants, to layer on dissonance with a single timbre. And I think this is interesting because most of the dissonances come from 3 distinct guitars that all have their own tones. Here, though, we have a single guitar, single tone, harmonizing with itself, creating all of this dissonance. And it's a building of dissonance, too, where your first note is going to fade out as your second, third, fourth, whatever notes are still existing. And so it's... what would I even call this? It's ever-changing, though, where the group of notes that are playing, you're going to be adding some new and losing some old, and it's going to shift this harmonic evolution throughout. It just sounds like spacey dissonance, though, to me. Like, oh yeah, vastness of space, echoey stuff, very, whoa, dude, but also like crushing weight of unstable harmonies and the tension that that brings. And, that's a pretty cool sound too. I think the vastness of space, which is kind of what I'm getting here, pairs well. I tend to prefer it with a level of awe, positivity, but it pairs well with tension and dissonance, the vastness of anything. Feeling so small can certainly feel like the walls are closing in. You can start to feel like, a shortness of breath. Chest is getting a little tight. You start to realize how big this whole universe is, all of life, and how tiny you are within it. And you're like, oh, geez. Yeah. I think that it can have both, depending on your perspective on the vastness of life. And I think they do a great job at capturing a sort of tension and maybe even apathetic cruelty in their rendition of this blackened space rock stuff. Psychedelic blackened space rock. Who would have ever thought to do that? Obviously they did. I think that's going to wrap up the musical part to this. Let's dive into some lyrics, see what's going on there. And this appears to simply be the story of a civilization's final moments as a comet comes crashing down towards them. It says the building's shiny outer shell is tearing. An orange furnace is sizzling up the staircase, and the glass city is screaming at its joints. It's the last minutes of life before the black cloud. From now on, the night will always be Satan's dark expectation of the end begins. We have a future, if only. Now the cosmos is bombing it to ashes. It ends, stating ruins fill the horizon. The footprint of society is blazing. In 200 years, no one will remember us anymore. And the title of the track, Komeetta, translates to comet, which is chanted over and over and over in the chorus. Pretty straightforward tale here. I believe the dissonance lines up with this. It is scattered in a way, but also terrified. There is tension and chaos. Makes sense. A comet's crashing down. Societal norms are kind of thrown out the window as survival instincts kick in. But there's also a passiveness to the narration that I think is interesting. It's not a narrator. There is a mentioning of we have a future and no one will remember us. This is someone who is part of this society that's about to be destroyed. And they're passively speaking about all of this as fact rather than putting any emotion into it. And I think that's an interesting perspective to have on a story like this. I don't know if the cosmic delayed section in the bridge, I can't really make heads or tails of that within the context of the lyrics, but I certainly think that the noisiness in here, it certainly captures the abrupt chaos of a society on the brink of destruction. There's nothing really positive in a moment like this, so the noisiness and harmonic instability makes a lot of sense to me. But these are just my thoughts on Oranssi Pazuzu's, what is this track called? Oh yeah, Komeetta. What'd you think of it? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Do you have your own opinion, take, or perspective on this? Please put all of that and any other thoughts you have down into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. All right, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. As usual. Also, unlike last week, and unlike every other video this week, the follow-up to this, as we look at a modern track from this band, is airing now. If you're watching this live, you got about 3 minutes left until it comes on. Tomorrow, though, we're going to kick off the next band and look at their then track, while Wednesday we'll look at their now track. All right, until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.